We're going to start with a prayer. And before we pray, I'd like you just to put your feet on the ground if you're sitting in a comfortable place where you can do that. And maybe put your hands on your thighs if you're sitting upright like that. And I know, some people rushed from here or from there or from the couch in the living room to the kitchen table. We're all mostly in our houses now, but maybe it took a little bit to get here on time. So if you could just close your eyes if you feel comfortable, or just soften your gaze a little and take a few deep breaths so that you can really be present right in this moment. So I'll just be quiet and just take a few deep breaths, settle into your chair. You can even sigh because you're muted, so you can make as much noise as you'd like. And just take a breath that fills your lungs. And just be curious for a minute about what you're feeling, what your body is saying. Is it saying, I'm relaxed? I need to relax. I'm letting go of what happened before. I'm just coming to this moment. And as you notice random thoughts and feelings, see if you can name them. I'm feeling energized by all of your faces and attention. I'm feeling hopeful for a class filled with insight and learning. Feeling a little nervous. I want to make sure that your expectations are met and hopefully even surprising things happen. So I've named the things I'm feeling. I want you just to take another minute to name your feelings, your thoughts. And as you name them, see if you can let them go and just come back to be here. No judgment, just invitation. And as your eyes are closed, I'll just offer a prayer to begin our class. Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, our God of our ancestors, our mothers and our fathers, our grandparents, all who came before us. Let the sanctity of your presence energize us and inspire us. Let the wisdom we've been given become our wisdom. Let our own hopes for being good people in this world come to fruition through our study, our learning, our practice, our failures, our falling down and our getting up, trying again with renewed purpose. Holy One, be with us, bless us, hold us close. And we say, Amen. And I invite you to take one more deep breath, in and out. Feel your part of this big group of people who want to be better, who want to deepen their ability to put goodness and strength and love and compassion and loving kindness into the world. How amazing to be here together to do that, to learn from one another. So last week we talked about the what of Mussar. What is it? It's this path to doing better. It's a path with steps that are called midot, that are measures of our different soul characteristics, the pieces of us that have been given to us by the Divine One, by the Holy One, or by being a human being, if you want to leave divine out. Just human beings have the capacity for all of these character traits. We have them all within us, and we each have them in a different measure, a different midah. Our work is to find that balance on the continuum, on the spectrum of those different midot, to find a balance that is the menschy balance, the balance that brings peace and harmony and equanimity and joy and love into the world, and not the ones that get us into trouble over and over and over again. So each of us, what's the what? Each of us is meant to put ourselves on this path and be our own kind, compassionate judge of who we are and where we need to go. We each get to create our own soul curriculum. And we talked a little bit about how it's not that hard, if we think about it, to write that curriculum. We can look at the list of midot, 18 midot that Alan Marinas has in his book, and we could put stars by the ones that we really need to work on. Those are the ones that are calling to us to begin to change, to find a different place on that scale. So that's the what, the very short what of Mussar. What I didn't teach you is about the whole history of Mussar from the late 18th century, but you can read about it in Alan Marinas' book, and you can just Google Mussar and read about Rabbi Israel Salanter, who began this, but it really came before Rabbi Salanter, because Jews have always cared about the ethical life. So that's the what of Mussar in a very general sense. And now we want to go to the how. How do we do this? How do we put ourselves on this path? How do we make progress in our own curriculum that we're trying so hard, we hope, to practice? How do we keep ourselves practicing? How do we find, I don't know about you, but if I don't have success in something, I tend to move on to something else. So I want you to have some success right away, and I know you can, because success in Mussar means, as I said last week, a very small step forward. One time when you find yourself in that situation that always gets you into trouble and you do it differently, woo, 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 you get to pat yourself on the back and say, I had a Mussar success. Today, this very day, I did that. I put some space between the match that I usually light the flame with, and I blew it out instead. I found myself doing something different just once. It's very, very satisfying to have that kind of experience. And I know you will. You're going to have a lot of those experiences. But how do you do it? How do you do it? So you have a whole book that's going to help you go through and do it. But today what I want to talk about is, if you want to just do it, where do you start? So we're Jews. Where do Jews start? They always, 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 always start with study. We study. We are known as the people of the book for good reason. We have a lot of books. We have a lot of texts. We have a lot of texts that can be Mussar texts. In fact, most of what we study as Jews could be called a Mussar text in some context or another. I'll give you an example. And I think we have a screen share on this one. This is the screen share, Gina and Jen, called Who is Wise? If you can put that up.
Can you see that, Rabbi?
Yes, thank you. You can just move it up a little bit so we can see the whole thing at once.
Let me move it down a little bit.
Or down, whichever you.
There we go.
A little more.
There we go.
There we go. Perfect. So some of you have heard of the section of the Mishnah. The Mishnah is a first, second century text that is the beginning, that is part of the Mishnah, and the Mishnah and the Gemara together make the Talmud. So this is the real core of our Jewish study texts. And Pirkei Avot, if you can see in the parentheses, Pirkei Avot 4:1, it says there, Pirkei Avot is a fantastic little book of great wisdom. Wisdom you can use in your everyday life all the time. In fact, between Pesach, which is coming sooner than we all imagined, Pesach and Shavuot, it's traditional to study Pirkei Avot, to study these texts. So I'm showing you, by bringing this text, I'm showing you can find a Mussar text anywhere, almost anywhere in the Jewish corpus of learning. So this text says, who is wise? The one who learns something from each and every person. Now we could stop right there. The one who learns something from each and every person. Why could we stop right there and teach all of Mussar in one line? Because Mussar is based on the idea that you and I and every single person on this screen and every single person you will ever meet is created, B'Tselem Elohim, is created in a divine image, meaning that person has some goodness that we can learn from. Now, if we lived our lives.
Hello, Judy.
Oh, yes?
Well, hi, did you ever get your call?
Can I call you back? I'm on.
Okay. If we lived our lives just with that one line, one who learns something from each and every person, we would be learning the midot of what? Look below, humility versus arrogance. If we're humble enough to understand each person has something to teach us, we're going to learn a ton every single day. We're going to limit our own arrogance, because when we look at someone and we look down on them, what is that saying? We're saying we're better, that we have more Tselem Elohim than that person, that we have more goodness in us or more intelligence or more whatever. We can also learn gratitude versus avarice. How grateful are we that we are in the world where other people can teach us something? And this one little text can teach us all of these other midot, because it continues. This rabbi is asking, how do you live in the world in a way that makes you satisfied? You can use the word happy, but it's deeper than happiness. I'm not sure what word you could type some words into the chat. What is it when we feel that our life has meaning, that we have goodness and we have richness in our world, not just in our pockets? So who is wise? The one who learns from everyone. Who is mighty? He who is slow to anger. Think about that in our world. Think about how much anger people want to throw out into the world as if that makes them powerful. The more anger, the more power? No, the rabbis are saying, no, it's the opposite. If you're powerful, it's because You can control your anger. You can control your upset. Who is rich? The one content with her lot. There's the gratitude. We have so much. How could we even think we need more than that? Who is honored? The one who honors his fellow human beings. Honor, kavod, is the heart of and connected to that idea that each person is created in the divine image. There was a time period where I was dealing with someone who had a lot of anger. And I had to meet with this person pretty regularly. And I realized if while I was meeting with him, I was saying in my head, literally saying in my head, B'Tselem Elohim, B'Tselem Elohim, and looking at this person in the eyes and saying, this is a creature of God, just like I am. I have to honor this person. That it actually allowed my anger to abate. I could be calmer. I could look with gratitude at this person in my life. I could have equanimity. I'm looking at these midot. I could have equanimity. I could have patience. I could honor this person. So you see from this one small text how intertwined the midot are. Someone was asking before we started the class about order. And I was saying, well, it can be about order. It can be about equanimity. There are so many different midot. There aren't only the two ends of the scale, but sometimes a different midah is at the end of the scale than, let's say, humility and arrogance. It could be a different one in a given situation. So how do we start with Mussar? We start with some texts. Alan Marinas gives you a lot of traditional texts, both from just the Jewish corpus of writings and readings, but also some of the traditional Mussar teacher texts that are specific to each midah. So we start with study. But where do we find the things to study? We can find them in the traditional books, in Pirkei Avot, and now with Sefaria, you can find almost any Jewish text with one touch. If you don't know about Sefaria, look it up because it is such a great thing. You don't even have to have a huge library of Jewish texts. But you can also find it in everyday situations. They can be your text. An encounter with a person can be your text. I also want to recommend to you at the bottom of the page, you see it says www.gratefulness.org. If you go to gratefulness.org, you can sign up to get an inspirational text every single day in your email. I find a lot of them are Mussar texts. So I give you an example by Rabbi Sharon Brous, but they're from people from every tradition and movie stars and scientists. It's not just scholars of texts. So Rabbi Sharon Brous wrote, the challenge today is to be animated both by gratitude and unrest, by humility and audacity. Rabbi Sharon Brous is the rabbi of a congregation called Ikar in Los Angeles. She is advocate for social justice in many different realms. And here she gives you a Mussar text right there. And she's telling us that part of being grateful is using that gratitude to fuel our objections to the inequalities that make other people have less than we do. By humility and audacity, we have to be humble, but we also have to stand up and yell when we have to stand up and yell. We have to be audacious in our fight to bring justice into the world. So she's also talking about the midah of tzedek, of justice, of righteousness. Where do you find Mussar texts? You find them everywhere. You can sign up for them, you can find them, but it's not just the text. And that's something I really want to emphasize, is that once you start getting into the habit of being curious about what's happening all around you, you will see a Mussar text in almost every situation that you find yourself in. So I'm going to ask Gina to take down the screen share and ask you, I know the chat is full, but I'm not able to look at it. So if you have a question about what I've just said, if you can raise your hand in the raise your hand part, and Gina or Jen can just let me know there are people with questions and then unmute them. So any questions coming up? I think there's a raise your hand.
I'm not seeing somebody.
Okay,
Do you have anybody?
okay, that's all right. We can keep going. So I'm asking you to be curious. And I'm curious myself if since last week you discovered at least one midah that you feel is going to be part of your curriculum, your own personal curriculum, by being curious about yourself. And if you did find that and you want to talk about how you discovered it, it would be helpful for everyone else in the room to hear that, if you feel comfortable sharing that. Which midah did you realize is an important one for you? So again, if you want to, you can raise your hand so that we can hear other voices as well. I see some in the chat. So Christine, I see in the chat, can you unmute and just tell us?
Well, my husband is disabled, and very often when he interrupts what I'm doing because he needs something,
Yeah.
I tend sometimes to be less than enthusiastic.
Yeah.
So my goal is to realize that I want to be more loving and giving in whatever his need is. And
So
being,
yeah. So it's patience, it's generosity, it's
yes,
compassion,
yes.
right? It's all of those things. That's lovely. Thank you for being brave enough to talk. Anyone else?
Yes,
Oh,
Rob,
yeah.
Carol has her hand up.
Okay, thank you, Gina.
I also want to work on patience. I'm actually have my best friend from childhood living next door, and she has Alzheimer's.
Sorry.
And thanks. We've been best friends since we were 1. And I don't have a lot of patience. At times, I get caught off guard, and I really want to only be loving, compassionate, patient, kind. But I'm dealing with my own grief too, right? So it's a lot to handle.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
In a full-time job.
Yeah, well, this will be good for you because you'll be able to kind of put it into those categories. And again, for everyone, not just Carol, for everyone, it's small steps. It's small steps. And the first person you have to be kind to is yourself.
That's the
Okay?
hardest. That's the
You have
hardest.
to be very, very, very kind.
Yeah.
Okay, someone else have their hand up?
Yes, Hugh Wittig. Hugh, you just need to unmute yourself.
Hi.
Hi, can you hear me?
impatient.
Oh, Tracy, wait 1 sec. You'll be next, okay?
Okay.
Hugh, go ahead, Hugh.
Hi, I was impatiently waiting for you to call on me because I'm working on Savlanut. And I just wanted to share in a minute or two how I became aware that, first of all, it was your Mussar training, but Marianne and I were driving over the reservoir one day. I'm already retired and we're going to go for a walk. And there's some traffic and I am really getting steamed about being delayed to go on my walk to go to the reservoir when I'm retired. And I realized this is insane. So that was step one in realizing I got a problem. Step two was, and so I started to redefine how I would deal with this. So maybe a week or two later, I'm on the same street and I get caught at the red light. I'm really, this is pretty annoying getting stuck at a red light. It's a very rare event, of course. And then I realized that around the corner, 5 minutes ahead might have been a car accident waiting to happen to me. And that it was my good fortune to be at the red light and waiting. So these are the sort of tactics, if you will. Now it doesn't go away, never gets to zero. I have to work on it every day, but it's very enlightening. And I just want to reinforce finally the gratefulness.org, which you had recommended, which is insanely helpful to me. Every day it's the one thing of all the email that comes in that I read first. It's very, very helpful. So I hope people will do that because it's really helpful. That's it. I'm going to patiently go back to.
Thank you so much, Hugh.
We
Tracy.
have Ellen Montague coming up next.
Oh, okay, we'll do Ellen and then Tracy. Sorry, Tracy.
Okay, sorry.
Ellen, go ahead.
So I am addressing the one that deals with anger. Which one is that?
Anger.
Yeah, which midot?
Anger.
Anger. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's my ongoing struggle.
Yes. And I said anger kind of as a joke, but anger is a part of a lot of them because oftentimes when we're stymied by progress, we get angry at ourselves or at the person we perceive as keeping us from progress because we're being irritated over and over again. So a lot of the midot are going to address that. And again, I want to emphasize it's curiosity and it's a 3-step process. So let's say we're going to jump in with anger because both Hugh and Ellen talked about it. So let's say Ellen's, really mad at let's say someone. Hugh's really mad at the traffic, which is several someones that are getting in his way. What are those 3 steps? The first thing to do is to take a deep breath, right? It's a physical thing that's happening. To notice what is happening to our bodies. Usually when we're angry, our heart rate goes up. We might feel a tensing of our muscles. Our palms might sweat. We have a physical reaction. So if we can put that distance between noticing an explosion and say, I'm noticing all this anger. There's a lot of anger I'm feeling right now. It's all going on in your head. I'm noticing, I'm just being curious. I have a lot of anger. I might have good reason for that anger. There is a lot of traffic. I am delayed. That person is annoying. They are making it hard for me to do what I want to do in the world. That is all true. I'm going to notice that. And now that's step 1. Step 2 is that Bahira point. What are my options? What are my options? Who do I want to be in this moment? Do I want to be the angry, impatient, blustery, hurtful person? Probably not. Then we go to step 3, tshuva, return. Where do we go back to? This moment when we're sitting looking at our screen, listening to Rabbi Shanks talking in a calm voice, talking about all of you mentioned out there, all of you who want to be good people in the world, not angry, vicious people. You want to be patient, loving people in the world. So you go back to that and you say, how would a patient, loving person respond in this moment? That patient, loving person would say, maybe, this is really hard for me and I can feel myself getting upset. Let's make a plan to talk another day, depending on the situation. Or maybe that's a good time for the midah of silence. Silence is a great fallback option, I'll tell you, for almost anything in life. Just listen. Sometimes if someone is really annoying, it's good to say, tell me more about that. Because you feel yourself getting all upset. Well, maybe you can hear something that will make you less upset. And if the person really feels heard, maybe that anger will go down. So you see, I just want you to see how studying the situation with curiosity, looking at your own feelings, and this happens in a minute or less. It's not right away. But if you get used to doing these 3 steps, things change. Even if all you do is nothing, something's changed. If before what you did was bang the horn, yell at your wife, how come we're late? You know, whatever it is, if you don't do any of that, it's all different. You get that woohoo, I had a Mussar success moment just by doing nothing. Because that's a return. That's a tshuva moment. Okay, one more, Tracy.
Go ahead, Tracy.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so, well, I also just want to say regarding patience, because that's also like a real biggie of mine for always, forever. I say to myself, I have really, really good parking karma. Like I can always find a spot where I need it. And I have really bad line karma. Like if I'm in a supermarket, the line that I'm on, the cash register will break, or the person in front of me won't have money when they're, so you can't have everything. So I think I'd rather have the parking karma than the line karma. But the other thing that I noticed about myself this week, and I think it's a combination of humility and equanimity, is so I found out something that I thought was really so cool and so excited, and I got really excited about it, and I wanted to like share it with people, but I realized that it really wasn't my story to share, because it happened to a friend of mine's daughter, and I was really excited about like sharing that with everybody. And I think that my friend thought, oh, you know, Tracy's going to probably tell everybody. And I thought, it's not my place. It's just not my place to share this information. And so I wrote to her and her daughter, and I said, I'm really excited about what I just learned, but I want you to know that it's not my story to tell. And it's not my place to say anything. And when you want to share it, you can. But my normal instinct is, because I get very excited and enthusiastic and happy, that I want to share it. So learning my place in the world and like what's appropriate, what's not, is something that I work on. And I was really happy. I think in the past I would have told everybody. I was really happy after practicing Mussar now for a couple of years or a year that I didn't do that. And that was really, you know, good growth for me.
Huge. Yeah, I think it's huge. And it was, again, I'm trying to help you see which midah you're working on. So it is humility. It's also really important midah called shmirat hadibur, which means watching what you say. Watching what you say. Being very aware of how powerful words are. Words, the rabbis remind us in the morning prayer service, God spoke and the world was created, right? Baruch Shamar, V'haya Olam. God spoke And the world, there was the world, because in the creation story, God talks and then there's the world. Why do the rabbis do that? Because they're trying to remind us we create worlds when we talk. We create atmospheres, we create love, we create hate. There's all kinds of ways. So you were also guarding your words. Shmirat HaDibur is guarding the words. So thank you for that. You help us understand how many different ways. Any other hands up, Gina?
Suzanne Krasna has her hand up.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Suzanne, unmute yourself.
There you go.
Thank you. I guess, well, I have to work on all those things, but lately I've been trying to get my house in order, literally my house, my office, my life, everything. I have these lists that go on and on forever. So I've been really working at trying to make a difference. Any room I walk into in my house, that I do something in that room to make it orderly or neater or something. The same thing with keeping track of my list of what I need to do and the priorities, etc. I just feel that I miss things. I miss dates. I miss, things that I've said I'm going to do, and then I find out later I didn't do it. And so this is a problem that I need to address.
That's a really good one. I love the idea of doing one thing when you're in that room. It makes a huge difference.
Yes, it does.
It's just one thing. So we're gonna move on to the next piece, but I just want to emphasize this curiosity idea. Be curious about what you're feeling. Be curious about what you're seeing. Be curious about repetitive situations that you find yourself in, and take those as your curriculum. So I'm going to ask Terry Moss to share with us. She's been studying Mussar for quite a number of years, and just share with us some of her steps that she uses, the how of her Mussar.
I'm going to pull up that screen share. Okay, Rabbi?
Do you want it now, Terry?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay,
thank you.
Thanks, Gina.
So Mussar is an intensely practical spiritual practice, which is why I like it. I have been following a spiritual practice for many years, but none of them were attached to Jewish values or texts. So I had to do a mental workaround and to feel comfortable with them. So Mussar gave me the Jewish context for spiritual practice. And my practice consists of these 5 steps. I start in the mornings by saying a prayer and reading my Mussar books, meditating for 15 minutes, and then during the day going on a hike and doing a hitbodedut, or talking out loud to God, which is one time when a mask comes in handy. Recently. I then journal, although not as regularly as I would like, and I meet with my Mussar group every 2 weeks, which we've been doing for about 8 years. It's easy to maintain a spiritual practice when life is going well, but I have found that when life takes a turn for the worse or is hard, that's when one's spiritual practice is really needed. And I'm going to tell you about a time about 3.5 years ago where my life turned upside down and my Mussar practice became a lifeline of sanity for me. There's a saying that pain is the touchstone of spiritual growth, and that's what happened to me. The 2 midot that worked beautifully for me during this time were Shema, or listen, where I used the mantra, listen and your soul will live, and bitachon, or trust, where I used the mantra, trust in God with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. These 2 midot were essential during this period of time when the future of my life felt so unknowable and fragile, and I was so afraid. Every day and in the middle of the night, especially 2 or 3 in the morning, I would apply these midot. Midot are all intertwined, just like Rabbi Shanks mentioned earlier, and they're connected. And the 3 other midot that came into play with the midot that I just described were humility, equanimity, and patience. So I would talk freely to God about what was on my heart and in my mind, and I would say these mantras over and over again, that I needed and wanted to trust in God with all my heart and not lean on my own understanding, which was limited, and that I needed to be quiet and listen so my soul would live. They became anchors for me and helped me get through that incredibly dark time. They deepened my relationship with God and my trust in the world and in the path in front of me. I use them not as intensely to this day, but they are always there for me when I need them. So my little story shows how I applied my Mussar practice and these steps, and I hope it encourages you to use Mussar, especially when life gets hard.
Thank you so much, Terry. And Gina, if you could keep this up, I'm just going to reinforce these. Reading, and I would say study, as I said before, different texts. Meditating, being alone. In Alan Marinis's book, he describes one of the Mussar teachers who says, see if I can find the quote. You can only get a feeling for your internal life when you are alone. You can only get a feeling for your internal life when you are alone. There you come to feel things you never knew about yourself. See what you're lacking spiritually and start to build your internal spiritual world. You need time by yourself, quiet time. And I know a lot of people say, I can't meditate, my mind is going to. You don't have to meditate. You just have to be alone and think and notice what you're thinking. And know that those thinkings and feelings, they come, they go, but you're going to learn a lot about your internal world by being alone. So start just with maybe 5 minutes a day of being alone. Dude, as Terry said, is even a next step to being alone, but it's being alone with whatever understanding you might have of a spiritual guide or friend or God, or just putting it into words what you're feeling. And it's very, very, very powerful. It is so powerful, very emotional. And it's just your own words. Sometimes when I do Dude, all I'm saying is, help me, God, help me. I need help. I can't do this on my own. Please help. I need your help. I need your strength. I need your love. I need to know I'm okay. Let me know I'm okay. And just doing that, I don't need to hear a divine voice coming out of the sky somewhere. I just need to express it. And I know I am surrounded with goodness and with strength. I feel God's presence. Just try it. It's a little scary the first few times, but it's so powerful, such a powerful thing. Journaling, when you have one of these successes, write it down. Write it down. When you're confused and you need to think about things, it really does help to keep a journal. And it does help to have friends to talk about Mussar with and to share your experiences. And I want to emphasize, a Mussar group is not a therapy group. It's a study group, and it's a way to help each other move along this path. Okay, let's close that. Thanks, Gina, and really thank you, Terry, for opening your heart. And I'm going to ask Judy Fines also to share her learning from her Mussar study.
Okay, so yeah, I've been practiced, I don't know how many years, but you know, when I think about what I've been working on the most, it's really been worrying about my kids. I mean, they're fine, but I just tend to worry about them. And what's really helped me is that basically is meditating, because and being curious. I think being curious is a big part of Mussar for me, and seeing all the different components that go into each midot. So I realize that, and I've listened to my kids about how they feel when they know that I'm worrying. And they've said that it makes them feel burdened and that I don't have confidence in them. So I started really picking up my meditating so that I'm doing about an hour a day most days. And I found that what it does is it lets me disconnect from circles of thinking that were causing me worry and the sense that I had to do something about it. And it lets me sit back and see it and be curious and just have some space and distance. And so that when I'm with them now, I can have both kind of a more silence and equanimity and trust inside of myself. And I can give that to them as well. And I can create an atmosphere of trust and, silence in myself to be open to them and allow them to make their own decisions and have faith in that. And I think studying all of the Medot over the years, the way they interweave is, the more familiar you become with each one and the more you hear others talk about it, over time you can't help but grow with it. And I also think, that's the kind of connective way of learning, but the meditation is in some ways the most essential for me to really grow. So.
Thank you so much, Judy. And there's a screen share for Judy that's a quote on silence and listening by one of my favorite writers, and her books really are Mussar texts as well. And Judy, maybe you can read it.
Perhaps the most important thing we bring to another person is the silence in us, not the sort of silence that is filled with unspoken criticism or hard withdrawal, the sort of silence that is a place of refuge, of rest, of acceptance of someone as they are. We are all hungry for this other silence.
So powerful. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Gina. We can take that down. So we have.
Can you put that one back up so we could copy it down?
Oh, sure. I think it came to you. We can send it with the recording. We'll send it with the recording so we don't have to take the time. We are going to have about, I wanted a little more time, but we're going to have about 6 or 7 minutes in small groups so that you can talk to a smaller group about some of the Medot, and we're actually going to focus on patience because that seems to be one that is so important for everyone. So I'm going to ask Gina to put the questions in the chat, and we won't have enough time for everyone to talk, but if you could have humility and only talk for a few for a minute or two or even a minute, I would say, when we break up. We'll break up into groups of, I think we said 4 or 5, Gina?
Mm-hmm. I have that all set.
And you'll get a warning when we're coming back to the group. So just spend a little time with the questions about patience. Okay. We were, I want to give you some homework. Thank you for being in the small groups. I hope you learned from one another. They were going to be longer. Next week, maybe we'll have a little bit longer time. But Jen, if you could put the link to my podcast on curiosity in the chat, and it'll go home as well to people. Yeah. So I recorded a podcast during COVID for the Mussar Institute, which is Alan Marinis's institute. And it's specifically on curiosity and being curious. So I would love for you to listen to it. I know some of you received it when I made it. It was early in the pandemic, so some of it might seem like a foreign land because things were changing so quickly. But please listen to that. And then I would like you to continue working on the Midah you were working on and try and do those steps that Jen, if you could also put those in the chat or in the recording email, the ones that Terry had in her screen share. If you could try, even for a short time this week, to do some of those steps. So you don't have to do them all and you don't have to do them for a long period of time, but do try and journal, try and meditate, just try and be alone Just try to be alone and see what's bubbling up for you. Try talking out loud about it. Just give it a shot. Say whatever comes to mind. If you need to address someone, you can say God, you can say Holy Spirit of compassion, you can say whatever, dear friend who's listening, whatever it is that feels right. And then just talk about what you're feeling or what you're working on. Let's say I'm working on generosity. I might say, God, I want to be a generous person and I find my heart closing. I want to give more. I want to give more from my heart. I want to give from my all that I have, from my abundance. And why can't I give more? I want to give more time to people who need that time. Whatever it is you want to say it. And maybe you just want to say, help me, help me, help me, which is what as I said, I often say. So try those steps, work on those. That's your homework. Listen to the podcast, work on Amidah, and be curious. Be curious. Before we end, I'm going to end with the poem that we sent you. But before we end, if anybody has a pressing question that you need to ask before we end, you can raise your hand in the chat, and I think we'll have time for 1 or 2 questions. Not in the chat, the raise your hand function, so that Gina and Jen can see. Any pressing questions before we leave?
Nothing so far, Rabbi.
Okay.
Sundari has her hand up.
Sundari has.
Sundari, okay.
I was just wondering if there was a midot that was connected to getting hurt, to being hurt easily. Just as a character.
So the word, just so everybody knows, so in Hebrew, midah is singular and midot is plural. So when you talk about one midah, it's midah, and when you talk about many, it's midot. Being hurt, I would say what came to mind immediately is equanimity. Your equanimity is easily, I don't know if you're talking about yourself, but equanimity is easily shaken. So what you might want to work on is that sense of knowing you have a strong place of quiet and calm, and that when someone says something or something happens that shakes that, you can be curious about it and say, oh, I'm feeling that feeling of hurt again. I know I'm feeling it. I'm going to look at it. And I'm going to do tshuva. I'm going to go back to that place that I know I have in me. I have equanimity. It's there somewhere. It's somewhere deep inside. And I'm going to sit and feel it. I'm going to feel strong. I'm going to remember all the people who have said kind things to me. Neurologists, psychoneurologists tell us that human beings have a bias toward negativity. That means that in a given day, 10 people can say nice things to you. One person can say a mean thing to you, and you are going to relive that mean thing over and over and over and over. But if you notice, you can go back to those 10 things and say, wow, I got up this morning and my husband said that was a great dinner last night. And then I went to the store and someone, backed away and said, you go first, and you go first in line. And I go through those 10 things, and boy, I feel so much stronger inside. I feel equanimity. I feel my soul is feeling a little bit stronger. Any other hands? Thank you. Any other hands that went up?
Barbara Breslau, were you waving your hand? No?
No, I was just checking the chat.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll end with one of my favorite poems. So Roger Keyes, this poem is Hukosai Says, and you can put it up on the screen, but I think some people might have printed it out as well. Roger Keyes is actually a scholar of Japanese prints from calligraphy and prints from the, I think, 17th and 18th centuries. And Hokusai is an artist who did some of these beautiful prints. And Roger Keyes, looking at these prints, wrote a poem about what he thought the artist was saying. And this is what he thought he saw in these prints. And I think it's so helpful, a poem for being curious and noticing and being kind to ourselves and all those other Mussar traits that we have been talking about today. Hokusai says, look carefully. He says, pay attention. He says, keep looking, stay curious. He says, there is no end to seeing. He says, look forward to getting old. He says, keep changing. You just get more who you really are. He says, get stuck, accept it, repeat yourself as long as it is interesting. He says, keep doing what you love. He says, keep praying. He says, every one of us is a child. Every one of us is ancient. Every one of us has a body. He says, every one of us is frightened. He says, every one of us has to find a way to live with fear. He says, everything is alive. Shells, buildings, people, fish, mountains, trees, wood is alive. Water is alive. Everything has its own life. Everything lives inside us. He says, live with the world inside you. He says, it doesn't matter if you draw or write books. It doesn't matter if you saw wood or catch fish. It doesn't matter if you sit at home and stare at the ants on your veranda or the shadows of the trees and grasses in your garden. It matters that you care. It matters that you feel. It matters that life lives through you. Contentment is life living through you. Joy is life living through you. Satisfaction and strength is life living through you. He says, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Love, feel. Let life take you by the hand. Let life live through you. So take that home. We have one more screen share that I forgot, and I'm going to apologize to Hugh because he had a screen share from his sharing. And Jen, I don't know if you can find it, and we'll just put it up before we go off. Jen or Gina?
I've got it right here.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Hugh, I meant to put it up after you talked.
There we go.
Thank you. Hugh, can you unmute and just read this for us?
Sure. Impatience leads to frustration, which leads to annoyance, which leads to anger, which leads to emotional outbursts, which leads to inappropriate behavior, which leads to no good. Be patient.
Thank you so much, and thank you for sharing before. And to everyone, and I hope the small groups helped you along as well. You know your homework, and you have your texts, and thank you so much to everyone who shared, and to Gina and Jen for making everything so smooth today. It was just great. Thank you.